The mystery of Genesis. In the beginning of human history, as recorded in the sacred texts of the Hebrew Bible, there lies a puzzle that has fascinated scholars, mystics, and seekers for centuries. A puzzle that begins with the very first chapters of Genesis, the book that opens the Old Testament, the book that tells the story of creation, the book that declares the origins of heaven and earth, light and darkness, sea and land, beasts and birds, and most importantly, humanity itself. Yet within these pages there is not one story of creation but two, not one account of humanity's beginning, but two, and when placed side by side, they raise questions that have disturbed the faithful and inspired the seekers of hidden truths. The first account is majestic, cosmic in scope, a poem of order and structure, 6 days of divine labor, and a 7th day of rest, God speaking creation into existence, light divided from darkness, waters divided from land, sun and moon hung in heavens, birds filling skies, fish swimming seas, beasts roaming earth, and then humanity, male and female, created together in the image of God, blessed with dominion over all living things, commanded to be fruitful and multiply. This is the creation of Genesis 1, a grand vision of humanity born complete and equal, a vision of man and woman as reflections of the divine image. But immediately following this account comes another, a very different story, intimate, earthy, focused not on cosmos, but on garden, not on 6 days of order, but on one man of dust, formed from soil by God's own hands. Breath of life breathed into his nostrils, placed in garden to till and keep it, alone until God fashions woman from his rib, a partner drawn from his flesh. This is the creation of Genesis 2, a vision not of humanity created together, but of man first, woman second, a vision not of image of God, but of dust and bone, a vision not of dominion, but of obedience. Do not eat of tree, for in day you eat, you shall surely die. Here, then, lies the mystery. 2 stories of creation, placed side by side, both revered as scripture, yet telling different tales, describing different processes, presenting different images of humanity. And from this arises the question that has haunted forbidden history. Did God create 2 kinds of humans? Did Genesis preserve memory of 2 creations? 2 lineages, 2 destinies, one in the image of God, one from dust of earth, one equal male and female, one hierarchical male, then female, one spiritual, one physical, one eternal, one mortal, a dual humanity hidden in the very first pages of the Bible. The rabbis of old noticed the problem. The scholars of church wrestled with it. The mystics spun visions around it. The Gnostics declared it proof of hidden truths. The folklorists created legends to explain it. And throughout history, voices have risen to suggest that the dual creation stories are not mere repetition, but revelation, that Genesis whispers of a deeper mystery, that 2 humanities were born in beginning, one destined to fade, one destined to endure, one bound to earth, one reflecting heaven, and that forbidden history lies in this hidden duality. To approach this mystery, we must look carefully at Genesis, not as children taught in Sunday school, but as seekers willing to see, to read, to compare. For Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not the same. They are written in different style, with different language, with different theology. Scholars call them products of different sources. The priestly source for Genesis 1, with its order, structure, cosmic vision, and the Yahwist source for Genesis chapter 2, with its intimate garden, its God walking and speaking, its earthy details, and in bringing these together, the compilers of the Bible preserved not harmony but tension, not unity but duality. And in that duality we glimpse forbidden truth. The first humanity of Genesis chapter 1 is majestic, created male and female together, equal, both image of God, both blessed, both commanded. both rulers of earth. This humanity is transcendent, reflecting divine nature, a humanity of light, of spirit, of equality. And some have called this the first humanity, the true humanity, the spiritual humanity, the Adam Kadmon of mystical tradition, the archetypal man and woman who embody the divine image before division, before corruption, before fall. The second humanity of Genesis 2 is fragile, formed from dust, dependent on breath, vulnerable, placed in garden under command, told what not to eat. Divided male and female with hierarchy implied. Woman drawn from man's rib, created after him. For him, this humanity is earthly, mortal, bound to soil, subject to temptation, destined to fall, and some have called this the second humanity. The material humanity, the fleshly humanity, the Adam of earth and the Eve of bone, the mortal lineage that suffers death and toil. Thus emerges the theory of two humanities, one spiritual, one physical, one divine image, one dust, one eternal, one mortal. And though church has long denied such reading, mystics and forbidden traditions have preserved it, whispering that Genesis itself reveals a secret dual creation, that humanity is not one but two, and that the conflict between them runs through history, through soul, through destiny. In this opening part, we set the stage for the forbidden history, the mystery of Genesis, the puzzle of two creations, the question of two humanities, a question that will lead us through scripture and myth, folklore and legend, mysticism and science, a question that will bring us to Lilith and Nephilim, to Gnostics and Kabbalists, to hidden bloodlines and forbidden prophecies, a question that asks not only what happened in beginning, but who we are, what we are, and whether within humanity itself there runs a secret duality, a division between spirit and flesh, image and dust, light and shadow, two kinds of humans created by God. This is the mystery that begins our journey, and it is the mystery that has been forbidden, suppressed, denied, for to admit it would shake theology, would challenge authority, would open door to hidden truths, and so it has been left in silence. Yet it remains in text, in plain sight, for those who dare to see, those who dare to ask, those who dare to read. Genesis not as repetition, but as revelation, not as confusion, but as prophecy, not as mistake, but as mystery. The mystery of two creations, the mystery of two humanities, the forbidden history of Genesis, the first creation story. The first creation story in Genesis is majestic, structured, poetic. Unlike the earthy narrative of the garden that follows, it unfolds with rhythm and order, a cosmic drama divided into days, each marked by divine command, and each closing with the refrain, "And God saw that it was good." Here creation is not chaotic, it is ordered, deliberate, precise, and at the climax of this ordered vision stands humanity, male and female created together, created in the image of God, created as rulers of earth. This is not dust and rib, not toil and curse. This is glory, blessing, dominion. And when we look closely at this account, we see a humanity that is different, a humanity that raises the question, did Genesis preserve the memory of another kind of human? The first chapter begins with formless void, with darkness upon face of deep, with waters covering everything, and God speaks, "Let there be light," and there is light. Creation begins with separation, light divided from darkness, day from night, then waters divided above and below, firmament set between, then dry land emerges. Seas gather, earth produces grass, herbs, trees, then sun and moon placed in heavens to mark days and seasons, then fish and birds created, then beasts of earth, and finally humanity, male and female, in divine image, blessed to rule. This is the grand order. 6 days of creation, 7th day of rest here. Humanity is not alone, but part of larger order, not formed from soil in intimacy, but spoken into being with majesty, not given one garden to keep, but entire earth to rule, not created in hierarchy. Man, then woman, but together male and female, both in divine image, both blessed, both rulers, both commanded. This is a vision of equality, of shared dominion, of humanity as reflection of God. And this has led many to wonder, is this the first humanity, the spiritual humanity? A humanity different from the one formed in dust in Genesis 2. The language of image of God is central, for nowhere else in Genesis is it so clearly declared, male and female created in image of God. This suggests humanity is not merely physical, but carries divine likeness, spiritual nature, a spark of eternity, something beyond flesh. And this image is shared equally, man and woman both. No hierarchy, no subordination, no rib, no delay, both together at once. This humanity is complete, whole, balanced, and some have said that this is the archetypal humanity, the Adam Kadmon of mystical Kabbalah, the cosmic human, the divine pattern existing before the division into earthly Adam and Eve. The first creation story also emphasizes blessing and command. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill earth and subdue it. Have dominion over fish and birds and beasts. Here humanity is given authority, power, responsibility, the earth entrusted to them, the creation subject to them. Humanity as steward and ruler. This is not the fragile Adam told not to eat of tree. This is not the vulnerable man of dust. This is the image of God exercising authority. This is humanity exalted, humanity divine, humanity destined for greatness. Scholars have long noted that Genesis 1 comes from the priestly source, written during exile, concerned with order, with cosmic vision, with liturgical rhythm, 6 days echoing 7-day week, creation as temple. And in this vision, humanity is not afterthought, but crown, created in glory. And this theological vision is very different from the earthy tale of Genesis 2, the Yahwist source, older, more personal, with God shaping man from clay, planting garden, walking among trees, commanding obedience. And when we set these side by side, the difference is stark. Two visions of humanity, one cosmic and spiritual, one earthly and fragile. The first humanity then appears as a different order of being, one that some have interpreted as spiritual race, beings of light, androgynous in unity, reflections of divine, not yet divided, not yet fallen, not yet bound by death, while the second humanity of Genesis 2 appears as material race, formed from dust, bound to mortality, divided male and female, subject to temptation, destined to fall, and thus the theory of two humanities gains strength. For Genesis 1 and 2 describe not one story repeated, but two different creations, two different humanities. Ancient Jewish mystics hinted at this, speaking of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, existing before creation, pure light, divine image, cosmic archetype, and of Adam Harashon, earthly, Adam, formed from dust, mortal, fallen. And in this duality we see reflection of Genesis 1 and 2, the first creation story describing Adam Kadmon, the second describing Adam of dust, two humanities, one divine, one earthly, one eternal, one mortal, and the forbidden history whispers that both were created, both exist, both run through the story of humanity. The rabbis also notice the difference, some declaring that Genesis 1 speaks of first woman, created with man, and Genesis 2 of second woman, created from rib, giving rise to legend of Lilith, the first wife of Adam, created equal, refusing subordination, banished, replaced by Eve, and this legend preserves memory of two creations, two women, two humanities, one equal, one subordinate, one spiritual, one material, and though folklore transformed it, the roots lie in the text, in the two stories side by side. The Gnostics later took up this vision, declaring that Genesis 1, humanity was spiritual, created in image of true God, while Genesis 2, humanity was bound in flesh, created by lesser power, subject to corruption, and they read the Bible as coded history of two humanities, one of spirit, one of matter, one destined for salvation, one bound to ignorance. And though church declared this heresy, it echoes the duality in Genesis, the two creation stories, the two kinds of humans. The first creation story, thus, is not just repetition, but revelation, a vision of humanity beyond dust, beyond mortality, beyond division, humanity as divine image, humanity as light, humanity as archetype. And in forbidden history, this is remembered as the first humanity, the higher humanity, the one suppressed by church, the one hidden by later interpretation. For to admit that two humanities exist would challenge doctrine, would undermine authority, would open door to Gnostic and mystical teachings, and so it was denied, declared heresy, forbidden. Yet the text remains plain and clear. In Genesis chapter 1, humanity created male and female, together, in image of God, blessed, rulers of earth. And this is different from Genesis 2, Adam of dust, Eve of rib, command of obedience, fall and curse. And the tension remains, the duality persists, the mystery survives, whispering of two humanities, of two creations, of forbidden history. Thus, in part 2, we see the first creation story as majestic vision of humanity in divine image, equal, male and female, blessed, rulers, reflections of God, perhaps spiritual beings of light, archetypal Adam, Kadmon, different from fragile Adam of dust, different from subordinate Eve of rib, different from garden and fall. And here begins the theory of two humanities, the forbidden history of Genesis, the question of who we are, of what we were meant to be, of what was lost, of what survives. The second creation story. The second creation story of Genesis begins not with cosmic order and divine image, but with earth, dry and barren. No shrub of the field had yet appeared, no rain had yet fallen. No man was present to till the ground. And from this scene of emptiness, the Lord God forms man from dust of ground, breathing into his nostrils breath of life, and man becomes living being. This is Adam of earth, the earthy humanity, the fragile humanity. And immediately the tone of Genesis shifts from majestic to intimate, from cosmic to personal, from universal creation to garden story. And this is where the question of two humanities deepens. In Genesis Topu, humanity is not male and female created together. It is man alone, formed from clay, dependent upon divine breath, placed in a specific location, the Garden of Eden, a paradise planted by God, filled with trees pleasing to sight and good for food, with tree of life in midst, and tree of knowledge of good and evil. And man is set there not as ruler of whole earth, but as gardener, to work and to keep. And he is given command, from every tree you may eat, but from tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in day you eat of it, you shall surely die. This is not dominion, but obedience, not universal authority, but conditional trust, a humanity bound by rule, bound by warning. This man of Genesis chapter 2 is fragile, alone, incomplete, and God declares, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make helper, suitable for him." And so God forms animals from ground, bringing them to Adam to see what he would call them, but no suitable helper is found. and only then does God cause deep sleep, take one of Adam's ribs, close flesh, and from rib form woman, brought to man, bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. Thus man and woman are created, but not equal, not simultaneous, not both in divine image, but woman from man. Second, derivative. Subordinate. This is different from Genesis chapter 1, where male and female together reflect God. Here woman reflects man reflects dust, and divine image is not mentioned. Thus we see that this second creation is not same humanity as first. This is humanity bound to earth, bound to hierarchy, bound to command. This is humanity of dust and rib, humanity subject to temptation. For soon serpent enters, cunning and deceptive. Questioning woman, has God said you shall not eat? Woman replies, we may eat, but not touch. Lest we die, serpent answers, you shall not surely die. Your eyes shall be opened. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Woman sees fruit as good, takes and eats, gives to man. He eats. Eyes opened, they know they are naked. They hide. Shame enters, fear enters. This is fall. This is curse. This is destiny of second humanity. The consequences unfold. God walking in garden calls, where are you? Adam hides. Woman blames serpent. Adam blames woman, and God curses serpent, enmity. With woman's seed curses woman. Pain in childbirth, desire for husband. He shall rule over you. Curses man, toil in ground, sweat of face, return to dust. And humanity of Genesis 2 is cast out, barred from tree of life, destined for mortality, destined for suffering, destined for death. This is the second humanity, different from the blessed rulers of Genesis 1, different from divine image. This is humanity fallen, humanity mortal, humanity condemned. Scholars note that Genesis 2 reflects the Yahwist tradition, written earlier, with anthropomorphic God walking, shaping, speaking directly, a God who plants garden, who forms creatures, who sculpts woman from rib, a God of intimacy and closeness, yet also a God of command and judgment. And in this story, humanity is not cosmic archetype, but earthy creature, subject to divine law, tested, failing, cursed, exiled. And this stands in tension with Genesis 1, the priestly vision of humanity as divine image ruling earth. This second humanity has been interpreted through ages as literal, as historical, as our true origin, but forbidden traditions suggest otherwise, that Genesis 2 does not describe first creation, but second, not archetypal humanity, but later humanity, not spiritual beings, but fleshly beings, not image of God, but dust of earth, not eternal, but mortal, not blessed rulers, but fallen slaves, and that Genesis preserves memory of dual creation, two humanities, one higher, one lower, one spiritual, one physical. The legend of Lilith emerges from this tension, for rabbis notice that Genesis 1 describes woman created with man, but Genesis 2 describes woman created after man, from rib, and they asked, what of the first woman? What became of her? And folklore answered, she was Lilith, created equal with Adam, refusing subordination, leaving him, replaced by Eve. And this explains the dual accounts, the first woman of Genesis 1, the second woman of Genesis 2, two creations, two humanities, one equal, one subordinate, and, though dismissed as myth, it reveals the deep problem of text, two origins of humanity side by side. The Gnostics read Genesis 2 as story of lesser God, the demiurge, forming humans of dust, binding them to material world, while true God created spiritual humanity in Genesis 1, and they declared that serpent brought knowledge, not evil, but liberation, opening eyes, awakening spirit trapped in matter. And thus Genesis 2 humanity is enslaved, while Genesis 1, humanity is free, and the battle of two humanities is the battle of spirit and flesh, of light and darkness, of truth and ignorance. In Christian tradition, the emphasis was placed on Genesis 2, on fall, on sin, on curse, and Genesis 1 was overshadowed, reduced to prelude, and this shaped theology, humanity defined not by divine image, but by sin, by dust, by curse, by need of redemption, and forbidden traditions were silenced, the memory of higher humanity suppressed, the teaching of dual creations denied, for church required humanity to be fallen, guilty, dependent on salvation through institution, and thus Genesis 2 became foundation, Genesis 1 forgotten. Yet when we look closely, we see the difference remains. Humanity of Genesis 1 is blessed. Humanity of Genesis 2 is cursed. Humanity of Genesis 1 is divine image. Humanity of Genesis 2 is dust. Humanity of Genesis 1 is equal. Male and female. Humanity of Genesis 2 is hierarchical. Humanity of Genesis 1 is ruler of earth. Humanity of Genesis 2 is slave of toil. Humanity of Genesis 1 is eternal archetype. Humanity of Genesis 2 is mortal exile. And this duality cannot be erased. It whispers of forbidden history, of two humanities, of mystery and beginning. Thus Part 3 reveals the second creation story as narrative of dust and rib, of garden and fall, of command and curse, of exile and death, a story radically different from Genesis 1, and when set side by side they raise forbidden question. Did God create two types of humans, one divine image, one dust, one blessed, one cursed, one eternal, one mortal? And this question leads us deeper into the hidden history of Genesis. The two creations compared, when we place the two creation accounts of Genesis side by side, we are forced to confront a problem that is as old as Scripture itself, a problem that rabbis noticed, that scholars debated, that mystics seized upon, and that theologians have often tried to smooth away. For Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not the same story told twice. They are radically different visions of humanity's origin. And in the space between them lies the possibility of a forbidden history, the possibility that two different types of humans were created, two humanities born at beginning, two destinies written into text. In Genesis chapter 1, we find order, symmetry, repetition, a cosmic pattern of 6 days, each marked by command and fulfillment, each building toward climax. Humanity created last, male and female together, both in image of God, both blessed, both rulers of earth, both given dominion. This is the first humanity, exalted, divine, equal, archetypal, spiritual. And the text ends with God resting, seeing all that was made, calling it very good, a vision of perfection, of harmony, of blessing. In Genesis 2, we find intimacy, detail, earthiness, no cosmic order, no 6 days, no divine image. Instead, a man of dust formed, breath breathed, placed in garden, commanded, tested, alone, until woman formed from rib. And this humanity is fragile, dependent, subordinate, cursed, cast out, destined for toil and death. This is the second humanity, mortal, earthy, fallen, bound to suffering. And the story ends not in blessing, but in exile, flaming sword barring return, mortality assured, struggle certain. The contrast could not be greater. One humanity created equal, the other divided and hierarchical. One humanity reflecting God, the other reflecting dust. One humanity entrusted with dominion, the other condemned to toil. One humanity blessed, the other cursed. One humanity archetypal, the other historical. One humanity eternal, the other mortal. And the question arises, how can both be true? How can both be origins unless there are two creations, unless there are two humanities? Scholars of the Bible have long recognized that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 come from different sources. The priestly writer of Genesis 1 concerned with cosmic order, liturgical rhythm, creation as temple, humanity as crown, and the Yahwist writer of Genesis chapter 2 concerned with story, intimacy, command, sin, and fall. These two traditions were combined in one book, placed side by side, without harmonizing, preserving the tension, preserving the duality. And in that preservation lies the mystery, the unresolved question, the forbidden interpretation. Some traditions sought to reconcile them, claiming Genesis 1 describes creation in general, Genesis 2 in detail, but this fails for details contradict. In Genesis 1, animals are created before humans. In Genesis 2, animals are formed after man. In Genesis 1, man and woman together. In Genesis 2, woman from rib after man. In Genesis 1, humanity given all seed-bearing plants for food. In Genesis 2, one tree forbidden. In Genesis 1, humanity is divine image. In Genesis 2, dust and rib. In Genesis 2, one blessing. In Genesis 2, a curse. And no harmonization erases this. The contradiction remains. Rabbis noticed, some declaring that first woman of Genesis 1 was Lilith, created equal with Adam, refusing to submit, leaving him, replaced by Eve of Genesis 2, created from rib, subordinate, and this legend preserves tension, explaining difference. Two women, two creations, two humanities, one equal, one subordinate, one spiritual, one physical, and though folklore transformed it into demon myth, at root it addresses textual problem. Two accounts, two beginnings. Mystics noticed two, declaring that Genesis 1 describes Adam Kadmon, primordial humanity, cosmic archetype, male and female as one, divine image, spiritual being of light, while Genesis 2 describes Adam of dust, earthly humanity, divided, mortal, fallen, and thus Kabbalah preserves duality, two humanities, one heavenly, one earthly, one eternal, one mortal, one hidden, one manifest, and this echoes Gnostic teaching that Genesis 1, humanity is created by true God. Genesis 2, humanity by lesser power, bound in matter, trapped in ignorance, needing liberation, and here again, two creations, two humanities. The Church rejected these interpretations, insisting on unity, declaring Genesis 2 as continuation, not contradiction, teaching humanity as one, fallen, in need of redemption, through Christ, and suppressing voices that spoke of dual humanity. For such teaching threatened authority, undermined doctrine, weakened claim of Church as sole mediator, and so forbidden history was buried. Yet whispers endured, in mysticism, in legend, in hidden texts, in apocrypha, in esoteric schools. When we compare the two creations, we also notice the differing role of God. In Genesis 1, God is transcendent, speaking, commanding, distant, creating by word, majestic, universal. In Genesis chapter 2, God is immanent, shaping with hands, breathing breath, planting garden, walking in cool of day, close, intimate, personal. And this difference suggests different theological visions, perhaps even different conceptions of deity. One higher God of spirit, one lower God of matter, and forbidden traditions took this seriously, identifying Genesis 1 creator with true divine, Genesis 2 creator with demiurge, lesser power, jealous, commanding, punishing. And so the two humanities correspond to two deities, two powers, two origins. The implications are vast. If Genesis 1, humanity is spiritual archetype, divine image, and Genesis 2, humanity is material creature, dust and rib, then we are both. We are dual, we are spirit and flesh, We are image and dust. We are eternal and mortal. We are blessed and cursed. We are rulers and exiles. And the struggle of humanity is struggle between these two selves, the higher and the lower, the light and the shadow, the divine and the earthy. And this duality runs through history, through religion, through myth, through soul. This duality also explains contradictions in human destiny. For some texts speak of humans as little lower than angels, crowned with glory, destined for eternity, while others speak of humans as grass, fading, dust returning to dust, mortal and weak, and both are true if two humanities exist. Both are true if we are dual, and Genesis itself preserves this mystery in its opening chapters, placing two creations side by side, unresolved, forbidden. Thus Part 4 shows us the comparison, the contradictions, the tension, the mysticism, the legends, the interpretations forbidden and suppressed, the possibility that Genesis preserves memory of two creations, two humanities, one divine, one earthly, one eternal, one mortal, one archetypal, one historical. And this is foundation of forbidden history, the secret that church denied, the mystery that mystics preserved, the puzzle that still haunts us, the question of who we truly are, the theory of two humanities. The idea that Genesis describes not one creation of humanity but two has been considered by rabbis, mystics, heretics, and modern scholars alike. And although the official doctrine of the Church insists on unity, the text itself continues to whisper of duality, of a higher humanity created in the divine image, and of a lower humanity formed from dust, of a race of light and a race of clay, of beings of blessing and beings of curse. This is the theory of two humanities, a forbidden interpretation, yet one that refuses to die. The first humanity, described in Genesis 1, is created male and female together, both equal, both bearing the image of God, both entrusted with dominion, both blessed. Their creation is cosmic, majestic, transcendent, and their nature is divine likeness. They are not commanded to avoid one tree. They are not threatened with death. They are not cursed. They are simply blessed and given authority. This humanity is exalted, archetypal, spiritual. Some would say angelic in nature. Some would say luminous beings, reflections of divine essence, not bound by mortality. The second humanity described in Genesis 2 is created differently. Man first from dust, then woman from rib, both placed in garden of obedience, tested, tempted, falling, cursed, exiled, destined for toil and mortality. Their creation is intimate, earthy, and their nature is fragile, dependent, subject to law, subject to failure. This humanity is mortal, historical. The humanity we know, born of dust, returning to dust, bound by sin, bound by death. This is the second humanity, the earthly humanity. From this emerges the theory of two humanities, one spiritual, one physical, one eternal, one mortal, one divine image, one dust, and the difference between them has been preserved in hidden traditions. For to acknowledge it openly would be to undermine church authority, to challenge theology of sin and redemption, to question the role of priesthood. And so it was forbidden, yet it endured in whispers, in legends, in mystical writings, in heresies, suppressed by Rome. Jewish mysticism developed the idea through the concept of Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, created in divine light, archetypal, cosmic, existing before material creation. This Adam corresponds to Genesis chapter 1, the humanity of divine image, while Adam Harishon, the earthly Adam, formed from dust, corresponds to Genesis 2, the humanity of clay, fallen and mortal, two Adams, two humanities, one above, one below, one hidden, one manifest, and Kabbalistic teachings describe Adam Kadmon as blueprint of all souls, while earthly Adam is shadow, broken vessel, fragment of original light. Gnostic traditions developed it further, teaching that Genesis 1 creation was the work of true God, higher deity, while Genesis 2 creation was work of lesser God, the demiurge, jealous, ignorant, binding souls in matter. And thus, two humanities exist, one of spirit created by true God, one of flesh created by demiurge. And salvation is awakening of spiritual humanity, trapped in physical humanity, liberation of light from clay, return of divine image to source, and this interpretation was condemned by church as heresy. Yet it endured in Nag Hammadi texts, in Gnostic gospels, in secret sects that proclaimed humanity divided. Even within rabbinic tradition, hints remain. The legend of Lilith explaining, first woman created equal with Adam, corresponding to Genesis 1, and Eve created from rib, corresponding to Genesis 2, two women, two humanities, one independent, one subordinate, one equal, one derived, one spiritual, one physical. And although Lilith became demonized in folklore, she embodies the forbidden idea that two creations exist, two beginnings preserved in Genesis. Christian mystics, two spoke of inner and outer man. Paul writes of spiritual man and natural man, of Adam as living soul, and Christ as life-giving spirit. And though interpreted theologically, this reflects the duality, two humanities, one of flesh, one of spirit, one of death, one of life, one of dust, one of image. And though church emphasized unity, mystics often hinted that humanity is double, higher and lower, spiritual and physical. The theory also resonates with ancient myths beyond Genesis, Mesopotamian stories of humans created first from divine essence, then from clay to serve gods. Sumerian myths of kings descending from heaven, while common people made of soil. Egyptian myths of Ka and Ba, double essence of humanity. Zoroastrian dualism of good and evil, light and darkness, and all suggest memory of two humanities, two origins, two destinies, carried across cultures. Preserved in Genesis, in form of two creation stories. The implications are profound. If two humanities exist, then history itself is dual. Conflict between higher and lower, spirit and flesh, divine and mortal, and individuals themselves may carry both. Inner struggle between image of God and dust of earth. Inner conflict between blessing and curse. Inner division between eternal and mortal. And this explains human paradox, capable of greatness and cruelty, of wisdom and folly, of divine compassion and brutal violence. For we are not one but two, not simple but double. And Genesis preserves this mystery in its opening chapters. The theory of two humanities also explains contradictions in Scripture, why some texts exalt humanity as gods, little lower than angels, destined for eternity, while others describe humanity as dust, fleeting, corrupt, condemned. Both are true. If two creations exist, both are true if humanity is dual, and the Bible itself contains voices of both, exalted and condemned, divine and fallen, image and dust. Forbidden traditions taught that the first humanity still exists, hidden, spiritual, unseen, while the second humanity dominates history, and the task of spiritual seekers is to awaken, to remember, to reconnect with first humanity, to restore divine image, to rise above dust. And this awakening is apocalypse, unveiling, revelation, forbidden to the masses, but whispered in secret, preserved in mysticism, carried in legends, encoded in symbols, awaiting the time of unveiling. Thus, Part 5 reveals the theory of two humanities, spiritual and physical, image and dust, divine and mortal, preserved in Genesis, explained by rabbis, expanded by mystics, radicalized by Gnostics, suppressed by church, yet enduring in forbidden history, reminding us that humanity may not be one but two, that within us lie two origins, two destinies, two natures, and that the mystery of Genesis is not mistake but revelation, forbidden, yet alive. The role of Lilith among the many legends that surround the early chapters of Genesis, none is more mysterious, more feared, and more revealing of the hidden tradition of two humanities than the legend of Lilith, the figure who appears not in the canonical Bible, but in rabbinic commentary, in folklore, in mystical writings, in whispered tales carried through centuries. Lilith is said to have been the first woman, the companion created alongside Adam in Genesis chapter 1, equal to him in every way, not taken from his rib but formed as he was, male and female together in image of God. Yet she rebelled, refused subordination, fled from Adam, and for this she was condemned, demonized, erased, replaced by Eve of Genesis 2, the rib woman, the subordinate companion, and in this erasure we see the suppression of the first humanity, the forbidden truth of dual creation. The origin of Lilith lies in ancient Mesopotamian myth, where Lilitu and Lilu spirits wandered, figures of night and wind, sometimes demonic, sometimes divine. And these ancient echoes entered Jewish tradition, transformed into legend of a woman who would not submit, a woman equal to Adam, a woman of power, and in this legend we glimpse the memory of Genesis 1. Humanity, male and female created together, both in image of God, both equal, and Lilith stands as symbol of that equality, that first creation, that first humanity. According to the alphabet of Ben Sira, a medieval Jewish text drawing on older traditions, Lilith was created from earth as Adam was, not from rib, not from man, but equal. And when Adam demanded she lie beneath him, she refused, declaring, "We are equal. We were both created from earth." And she spoke the ineffable name of God and fled, leaving Eden, leaving Adam, settling by the Red Sea, becoming figure of independence, of rebellion, of exile. And Adam complained to God, who sent angels to retrieve her. But she would not return. And thus Eve was created from rib, from man, to be submissive, companion. And Lilith was cursed, declared mother of demons, slayer of infants, succubus of men, and her story became warning. Her name became fear. But beneath the fear lies the forbidden truth. That Genesis 1, humanity was equal, male and female together, and that this truth was erased. Lilith thus represents the suppressed first creation, the woman of equality, the humanity of divine image, and her demonization represents the victory of Genesis 2 humanity, the rib woman, the subordinate, the cursed, and this transformation reveals the deliberate suppression of forbidden history, the denial of first humanity, the erasure of equality, the replacement of archetypal creation with fallen creation. And in this, we see how the text itself was shaped, how traditions evolved, how myth preserved what canon erased. In Kabbalistic writings, Lilith is given deeper role, sometimes as dark counterpart of Shekinah, sometimes as consort of Samael, sometimes as queen of demons, and yet always as figure of power. Female, independent, feared, suppressed, but never forgotten, and her presence in mysticism suggests that memory of first woman, first humanity, persisted. Encoded in symbolism, hidden in legend, whispered in esoteric schools, forbidden in public, but alive in secret. The contrast between Lilith and Eve embodies the duality of Genesis. Lilith corresponds to Genesis 1 woman, created equal, spiritual, divine image. Eve corresponds to Genesis 2 woman, created from man, subordinate, physical, mortal. Lilith is first humanity. Eve is second humanity. Lilith is blessing. Eve is curse. Lilith is archetype. Eve is history. And the conflict between them mirrors the conflict between two humanities, two creations, two destinies. The demonization of Lilith also reveals how forbidden truths are suppressed, for by turning her into monster, the tradition erased her equality, denied her divinity, silenced her voice, but could not completely destroy memory. And so she survives, feared in amulets invoked in exorcisms, mentioned in Isaiah as night creature, whispered in folklore, preserved in art, rediscovered in modern imagination, reclaimed by feminists as symbol of resistance, and still carrying the echo of forbidden history. The truth of Genesis 1. Humanity. The story of Lilith also parallels other myths of first women, erased or suppressed, Sumerian tales of Inanna descending into underworld, Greek myths of Pandora bringing knowledge and curse, Egyptian myths of Isis defying power. All preserve memory of powerful female figure, equal or superior, later demonized, subordinated, transformed into warning, and Lilith belongs to this pattern. The suppression of first creation, the victory of second, the erasure of divine feminine, the replacement of equality with hierarchy, the burial of forbidden truth beneath fear and demonology. When we consider Lilith in context of two humanities, theory, she becomes more than folklore. She becomes key, for she is linked between Genesis 1 humanity and Genesis 2 humanity. She is bridge between two accounts. She is memory of first creation. Hidden within second, she is evidence that rabbis saw the problem, tried to solve it, created legend to explain it, and in doing so, preserved forbidden truth. That there were two creations, two women, two humanities, one erased, one remembered, one exalted, one cursed. The exile of Lilith mirrors exile of Genesis 1. Humanity, spiritual beings cast out, forgotten, replaced to be earthly mortals, and her refusal to return mirrors. Refusal of spirit to be bound by flesh, refusal of divine image to submit to dust. And so she remains outside, feared, condemned, but also free, symbol of first humanity, enduring, waiting, whispering, hidden yet alive, reminding us of what was lost, of what was erased, of what still remains beneath surface of history. Thus Part 6 reveals that Lilith is not merely demon of folklore, but symbol of forbidden history, memory of first woman, evidence of dual creation, embodiment of suppressed humanity, and her story explains tension of Genesis, explains difference of two accounts, explains why equality was erased, why hierarchy was imposed, why forbidden truth was buried, and her survival in legend shows that truth cannot be destroyed. It can only be hidden, demonized, transformed, but it endures, whispering still, calling still, reminding us that perhaps in beginning there were two humanities, and that one was erased. The Nephilim and the sons of God. The mystery of two humanities deepens when we move beyond Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 into Genesis 6. For here another strange passage appears, one of the most enigmatic in all of Scripture. A passage that has puzzled scholars, terrified priests, and inspired countless forbidden interpretations. It speaks of the sons of God and the daughters of men, of their union, and of the Nephilim, giants who walked the earth in those days, mighty men of old, men of renown, and, though the passage is brief, its implications are vast, for it suggests that humanity itself was not singular, that different lineages, different orders of beings intermingled at dawn of history. Genesis 6 begins with simple words, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them as wives of all which they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were Nephilim in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men, men of renown. Here we encounter beings who are not ordinary humans, the sons of God, a phrase mysterious and debated. Are they angels, divine beings, watchers from heaven? Are they descendants of first humanity, beings of spirit, image of God, yet fallen, or are they simply powerful rulers? Kings claiming divine origin. The text does not explain, it only declares that they saw human women, took them, and bore children, and those children were Nephilim, giants, men of renown, different, extraordinary, remembered in myth, feared in tradition. The daughters of men, by contrast, seem ordinary, perhaps representing Genesis 2. Humanity, earthy, mortal, fragile, and the sons of God represent Genesis 1. Humanity, divine, exalted, archetypal, and their union creates hybrid race, the Nephilim, neither fully divine nor fully human, mighty yet mortal, rulers yet corrupt, and this hybridization is followed immediately by divine judgment. For God sees wickedness of man great in earth, that every imagination of his heart only evil continually, and decides to destroy with flood, sparing only Noah. Thus Genesis 6 seems to preserve memory of intermingling between two humanities, one divine, one mortal, one of spirit, one of dust, their union, creating giants, heroes, monsters, remembered in myth, condemned by God, leading to judgment. And this passage connects directly to theory of two humanities, showing not only their separate creation, but their eventual mixing, their hybrid offspring, their corruption, their destruction. The word Nephilim itself comes from root nephil, to fall, suggesting fallen ones or those who cause others to fall. And in tradition they were giants, enormous, violent, devourers of men, oppressors of earth, and their memory appears again in Numbers, when spies report land of Canaan filled with giants, sons of Anak, descendants of Nephilim, before whom we were like grasshoppers. And this continuity suggests that Nephilim were remembered not only as myth, but as real, as race, as lineage. And some traditions connect them to forbidden knowledge, teaching of weapons, sorcery, astrology, arts forbidden to mortals. The Book of Enoch expands this story, declaring that watchers, angels descended to earth, lusted after daughters of men, took wives, begot giants, and these giants devoured all, taught forbidden arts, corrupted humanity, and their cries reached heaven, leading God to send flood, to chain watchers in darkness, to destroy giants. And this tradition, though excluded from canon, was popular in ancient Judaism, quoted in New Testament, and reveals how Genesis 6 was understood, a story of dual humanities, divine and human, mixing, producing hybrid race, leading to judgment. Thus the sons of God can be seen as remnants of Genesis 1. Humanity, beings of divine image, exalted, spiritual, intermingling with Genesis 2. Humanity, mortal, earthy, fragile, and their offspring, the Nephilim, represent unnatural mixture, forbidden union, producing corruption, violence, destruction, and the flood becomes reset, wiping out hybrids, preserving only one lineage, Noah, described as perfect in his generations, perhaps meaning pure in lineage, not mixed, preserving second humanity, ensuring survival of dust humanity, while first humanity fades into myth, into forbidden history. This interpretation aligns with ancient myths worldwide. Sumerian epics speak of gods mingling with mortals, creating heroes like Gilgamesh, half divine, half human. Greek myths speak of gods descending, mating with mortals, producing demigods. Hercules, Perseus, Achilles, mighty but mortal. Egyptian myths speak of divine kings descended from gods, ruling men, and across cultures we find same pattern, union, of divine and human, hybrid offspring, heroes and monsters. And Genesis 6 preserves Hebrew version, sons of God and daughters of men. Nephilim born. Flood follows. The Nephilim thus embody forbidden history. Evidence of dual humanity, proof of mixing, symbol of corruption. Memory of age before flood. When different beings walked earth, and their erasure from canon, their relegation to fragment, their exclusion from church teaching, shows how dangerous this idea was, for it undermines unity of humanity. It suggests plurality, duality, hierarchy. It suggests that not all humans are same, that some lineages are different, divine, others dust, and this challenges theology of original sin, challenges redemption, challenges authority, and so it was forbidden. Yet memory endures. In Enoch, in Jubilees, in Dead Sea Scrolls, in rabbinic writings, in Christian apocrypha, in legends of giants, in myths of demigods, in folklore of ancient races, in conspiracies of Nephilim bloodlines surviving to this day, ruling secretly, controlling nations, awaiting return, and whether literal or symbolic, the Nephilim continue to fascinate, because they embody the forbidden, they reveal hidden duality. They suggest that Genesis is not simple, but layered, not singular, but plural, not unified, but divided. In context of two humanities theory, Genesis 6 is essential, for it shows that first humanity did not vanish but mingled, that second humanity did not remain pure, but was corrupted, that hybrid races were born, that history is mixture of spirit and flesh, divine and mortal, blessing and curse, and that judgment fell because of this, wiping slate, narrowing lineage. But memory persists, and forbidden history keeps it alive, reminding us that even in canon, even in scripture, the traces remain, unerasable, undeniable. Thus Part 7 reveals that Nephilim and Sons of God passage is not marginal, but central, not myth but memory, not fantasy but forbidden history, for it points directly to existence of two humanities, to their mixing, to their corruption, to their judgment, and it preserves the echo of age when humans were not one but many, when earth was filled with giants, when bloodlines were mixed, when God intervened with flood, and this mystery continues to haunt us, reminding us that perhaps humanity is not singular, perhaps in beginning there were two, and perhaps even now remnants survive. Dualism in ancient thought. The idea of two humanities, one spiritual and one physical, one divine and one mortal, is not confined to the book of Genesis. It is a theme that echoes across ancient civilizations, myths, and philosophies, appearing in Sumerian tablets, Babylonian epics, Egyptian rituals, Greek philosophy, and Zoroastrian religion. It appears again in Gnostic texts, Kabbalistic visions, and mystical traditions. And the pattern is always the same. Humanity is not one but two, divided, double, created twice, one higher, one lower, one light, one shadow, and in this universal dualism, we find confirmation of the forbidden history. In Mesopotamian myth, one of the oldest creation stories preserved is the Atrahasis epic, in which gods grow weary of laboring and decide to create humans to bear their burdens. The great mother goddess mixes clay with the flesh and blood of a slain god, forming humanity. Here we see humanity as mixture of divine and earthly, of God and clay, already dual, already twofold, divine essence trapped in mortal vessel. And this pattern reflects Genesis 2, man from dust, breath from God, humanity divided between image and dust, between eternal and mortal. Yet older still are Sumerian myths, where kingship descends from heaven, and early rulers are semi-divine, living extraordinarily long lives, remembered in the Sumerian king list, where reigns stretch for thousands of years before the flood. And this suggests that there was once another humanity, exalted, longer-lived, closer to gods, replaced later by shorter-lived mortals. Exactly as Genesis suggests. First humanity exalted, second humanity mortal, and flood-marking division. The Babylonian Enuma. Elish also presents dualism, for their gods battle chaos monster Tiamat, dividing her body to form heaven and earth, order from chaos, and humanity created from clay, mixed with divine blood of rebel god, Kingu. Again dual, again mixture, again mortal and divine, and again echo of two humanities, one higher, one lower, one godly, one clay. Egyptian tradition also knew this duality. In their concept of Ka and Ba, two souls, one eternal, divine essence, one mortal, tied to body, one surviving after death, one fading, and humans were double beings, both divine spark and earthly flesh, and in myths of creation, God Khnum shapes humans from clay on potter's wheel, echo of Genesis 2, but each given Ka from divine breath, echo of Genesis 1. Dual creation in one being, divine and dust, image and earth. Greek philosophy also wrestled with duality. Plato spoke of world of forms, eternal, perfect, archetypal, and world of matter, changing, corrupt, imperfect, and humans as souls trapped in bodies, sparks of eternal light imprisoned in flesh, remembering higher reality, yearning to return, and this vision mirrors Genesis duality. First humanity, spiritual, second humanity, physical, soul trapped in dust, spirit yearning for return, and Platonic thought deeply influenced later Gnostics and Christian mystics, shaping dualist interpretations of Genesis. Zoroastrianism, ancient Persian religion, is most explicit in dualism, teaching of two principles, Ahura Mazda, god of light, truth, order, and Angra Mainyu, spirit of darkness, lie, chaos, and creation itself as battlefield. Between these two, and humans caught in middle, part light, part darkness, called to choose, to fight, to side with truth, and though not identical to Genesis, it resonates. Two humanities, one light, one dark, one divine, one fallen. Conflict running through history, destiny shaped by choice. Gnostic traditions later wove all these strands together, declaring that Genesis itself reveals duality, true God creating humanity of light in Genesis 1, Demiurge creating humanity of dust in Genesis 2, and humans double beings, spirit trapped in flesh, light bound in darkness, salvation awakening of spirit, return to source, and this was seen as forbidden, heretical, dangerous. But it was ancient, drawing on Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Greek, Persian streams, and preserving forbidden interpretation of Genesis. Kabbalistic mystics too spoke of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, archetype, divine image, and Adam Harishon, earthly man, dust, mortal, fallen, and they saw creation itself as unfolding of dualities, light and vessel, spirit and matter, blessing and curse, and humanity as mirror of that, double, divided. Two humanities within one. What all these traditions show is that dualism is not anomaly, not invention of later heretics, but universal memory, preserved in myths of many peoples, that humanity was created twice, or created double, or divided between divine and mortal. And Genesis preserves Hebrew version, two creation accounts, one cosmic, one earthy, one divine image, one dust. And when read alongside these parallels, Genesis appears not confused but deliberate, preserving ancient memory of dual creation, forbidden truth of two humanities. This universal pattern suggests that ancient peoples remembered a time when different beings walked Earth: divine kings, giants, demigods, long-lived ancestors, and later short-lived mortals. Fragile, cursed, and this aligns with Genesis: first humanity exalted, second humanity cursed. Nephilim as hybrids, flood as division, and myths across cultures echo same. For memory of dual creation cannot be erased. It survives in different tongues, different forms, different gods, but always same story. Humanity is double, two types, two origins, two destinies. Thus, Part 8 shows that the theory of two humanities is not isolated to Genesis, but part of wider ancient worldview seen in Sumerian kings, Babylonian clay, Egyptian Ka and Ba, Greek soul and body, Persian light and darkness, Gnostic spirit and flesh, Kabbalistic archetype and dust, all pointing to same truth: that humans are not one but two, that creation was not single but dual, that forbidden history is hidden in plain sight across cultures, and that Genesis is but one expression of ancient memory, of divided humanity, Christianity, and the suppression of dual humanity. When Christianity emerged in the 1st century, it inherited the Hebrew scriptures, including Genesis, with its dual creation accounts, its mysteries of Adam, Eve, Lilith, and Nephilim, and its unresolved tensions. Early followers of Jesus read these texts alongside Greek philosophy, Jewish mysticism, and Persian dualism, and so debates erupted about what Genesis really meant, whether humanity was one or two, whether spirit and flesh were separate, i.e., whether salvation was liberation of soul from body or redemption of one humanity through Christ. These debates shaped the very structure of Christian doctrine, and in process, forbidden interpretations were suppressed, silenced, condemned as heresy. The earliest Christians lived in a world filled with dualism. Greek thought taught that soul was higher than body, eternal form superior to corrupt matter. Persian Zoroastrianism spoke of cosmic struggle between light and darkness, and Jewish mysticism already hinted at Adam Kadmon and Adam Harishon, so it was natural that some Christians read Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 as two creations, two humanities, spiritual and physical, and they linked this directly to Jesus, declaring that he came to awaken spiritual humanity, to liberate light from clay, to restore first creation hidden within us. The Apostle Paul himself sometimes spoke in dual terms, writing of inner man and outer man, flesh and spirit, old Adam and new Adam, the first man Adam a living soul, the last Adam a life-giving spirit. And though church later interpreted these words metaphorically, mystics and Gnostics saw them as confirmation of dual humanity: one of dust, one of spirit, one fallen, one eternal. Gnostic Christianity flourished in 2nd century, teaching that Genesis 1 described humanity created by true God, beings of light, while Genesis 2 described humanity created by demiurge, lesser God, jealous, ignorant, binding souls in flesh, and fall in Eden was not beginning of sin, but awakening of knowledge, serpent a liberator, Eve an awakener, and salvation was return to light, rejection of flesh, liberation from dust. Humanity, restoration of spiritual humanity, and this interpretation preserved the duality of Genesis, but inverted church teaching, making what was condemned into truth and what was commanded into bondage. Texts found at Nag Hammadi in 20th century confirm how widespread this interpretation was. Writings like the Apocryphon of John and the Gospel of Philip speak of two creations, two Adams, one spiritual, one fleshly, and they retell Genesis as cosmic drama of two humanities, first forgotten, second enslaved. Jesus sent as revealer to awaken true humanity, to lead souls back to source, to liberate divine spark from prison of flesh, And in these texts, the forbidden history of Genesis is preserved in full force, clear, uncompromising, radical. But church fathers, seeking unity, authority, control, declared these teachings heresy. Irenaeus wrote against Gnostics, insisting that there is one creation, one humanity, one Adam, one fall, one redemption. Tertullian condemned dualists. Athanasius defended doctrine of incarnation against claims that Christ came only to liberate spirit. Augustine later developed doctrine of original sin, rooting all humanity in Adam of Genesis 2, making us one race, one fallen nature, one need for grace. And in this doctrine, the first humanity of Genesis 1 was overshadowed, reduced to poetic prelude, ignored as real creation, suppressed as dangerous interpretation. The church councils codified this suppression, canon excluding texts that spoke of dual humanity, apocryphal gospels banned, mystical writings hidden, Gnostic communities persecuted, their scriptures burned, their leaders executed, and with time the memory of two humanities faded from mainstream Christianity, preserved only in fragments, in heretical sects, in hidden writings buried in sand, until rediscovered centuries later. Yet even within orthodoxy, hints survived. Paul's language of flesh and spirit, contrast between old Adam and new Adam, doctrine of resurrection as transformation of corruptible into incorruptible, mortal into immortal, and mystics within church often spoke of inner light, hidden man of heart, Christ within, echo of Genesis 1 humanity, though cloaked in orthodoxy, whispers of duality remained. Augustine in particular shaped Christian view, declaring that all humanity was one, descended from Adam of Genesis 2, fallen through sin, condemned to death, needing redemption, and this doctrine of original sin erased possibility of first humanity surviving, or of two lineages, or of dual humanity. All collapsed into one story, one fall, one salvation, mediated through church, sacraments, authority, and this was deliberate, for if humans were dual, if some carried divine image untouched, if salvation was awakening rather than submission, church authority would be unnecessary, control would be lost, doctrine would collapse. Medieval mystics still hinted at dual humanity. Meister Eckhart spoke of divine spark in soul, hidden image of God untouched by fall. Julian of Norwich spoke of substance and sensuality in human being, one eternal, one mortal, one preserved, one suffering, and though not framed as two humanities, these were echoes, remnants, forbidden truth resurfacing in safe mystical language. Meanwhile, folklore kept memory alive, legends of Lilith, whispers of Nephilim, stories of giants, myths of secret bloodlines, rumors of divine ancestry, all preserved outside of doctrine, in superstition, in storytelling, in whispers at margins. And though church condemned, people remembered, for text itself remained. Two creation accounts, side by side, unresolved, undeniable. Thus Christianity became battlefield where dual humanity was suppressed, orthodoxy insisting on unity, heresy preserving duality, Gnostics declaring two creations, mystics hinting at two selves, councils forbidding alternative readings, yet text refusing to yield, refusing to erase difference, preserving forbidden history beneath surface, waiting for rediscovery. The consequences were profound. By erasing dual humanity, church shaped human identity for centuries, making us one fallen race, dependent on institution, fearful of sin, craving salvation, and yet beneath surface memory of first humanity lingered, resurfacing in Renaissance humanism, in Romantic mysticism, in modern esotericism, in rediscovery of Gnostic texts, in fascination with forbidden history, in persistent sense that we are more than dust, that within us lies divine image, higher humanity, forgotten, hidden, forbidden, but not destroyed. Thus, Part 9 shows how Christianity confronted dual interpretations of Genesis, how church suppressed forbidden truth, how Gnostic and mystical traditions preserved it, how doctrine of original sin erased memory of first humanity, how authority required unity, how forbidden history survived only in whispers, and how rediscovery of these interpretations today reopens question. Did God create two types of humans? Are we one or two, dust or image, mortal or divine, cursed or blessed? And what does it mean for our destiny? Medieval mysticism and esoteric preservation. When the councils of the Church had condemned the Gnostics, when the doctrines of original sin and one humanity under Adam had become law, it seemed that the forbidden history of two humanities was buried forever. Yet throughout the Middle Ages and beyond, whispers of this ancient truth survived, hidden in mystical writings, encoded in symbols, preserved in secret societies, whispered in esoteric schools, carried by those who dared to look at Genesis with unorthodox eyes, for though official Christianity silenced the teaching of dual humanity, it never truly disappeared. Instead, it lived underground, alive in the mysticism of Kabbalah, the allegories of alchemists, the visions of Christian mystics, the secret rituals of Templars and Rosicrucians, and the forbidden interpretations of Genesis that endured in silence. In Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalists preserved the vision of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, archetype of light, created an image of God, preceding all creation, contrasted with Adam Harishan, earthly man, formed from dust, broken, fallen, mortal, and this duality echoed perfectly the two humanities of Genesis, one divine, one earthly, one eternal, one mortal, and the Kabbalists taught that within each human being, both exist, spark of Adam Kadmon, hidden within vessel of dust, light within clay, and the work of mystic was to liberate that light, to restore first humanity within, to repair world through tikkun, restoration of fragments of light scattered by fall. The Zohar, central text of Kabbalah, speaks in symbolic language of two atoms, one higher, one lower, one male and female united, one divided, one dwelling in light, one in exile, and though cloaked in mysticism, it preserves forbidden history, dual creation, dual humanity, and its teachings were guarded in secret, taught only to initiates, lest church accuse of heresy. Yet the truth endured, preserved within Jewish mystical tradition, Christian mysticism. Two carried echoes. Meister Eckhart spoke of divine spark in soul, uncreated, untouched by sin, eternal, hidden within. And though church condemned some of his teachings, he insisted that within every human is point of divinity, image of God unfallen, archetypal humanity of Genesis 1, hidden beneath outer man of dust. And other mystics like Jacob Boushy in 17th century expanded this vision, teaching that humans have two centers, one divine, one earthly, one light, one dark, and the task of spiritual rebirth is awakening of higher center, return to first humanity. And this mysticism was often suppressed, yet survived in writings circulated quietly, influencing generations of seekers. Alchemists, too, preserved dual humanity in symbols of gold and lead, spirit and matter, higher and lower man, the great work of alchemy, not merely turning metals, but transmuting human soul, turning base dust into divine image, awakening hidden light, restoring Adam Kadmon within, and their cryptic texts filled with symbols of sun and moon, king and queen, marriage of opposites, were veiled expressions of forbidden history, of two humanities and the possibility of reunification. The Knights Templar, though primarily a military and financial order, were rumored to possess secret knowledge. Whispers claimed they discovered hidden teachings in Holy Land, perhaps scrolls from temple, perhaps remnants of Gnostic writings, and some later traditions suggest they preserved memory of dual humanity, knowledge suppressed by church, secret vision of Genesis, and though much is myth, their sudden suppression by church and accusations of heresy suggest they carried something dangerous, something forbidden, perhaps not only political power, but also forbidden teachings. Later, Rosicrucians in 17th century declared themselves heirs of hidden wisdom, speaking of invisible college, of secret knowledge passed down through ages, combining Kabbalah, alchemy, mysticism, and their manifestos hinted at dual nature of humanity, higher and lower, light and shadow, spirit and flesh, and their mission to awaken mankind. To restore lost wisdom echoes again forbidden history of Genesis. Freemasonry, too, though often secularized, preserved symbols of two pillars, dualities, higher and lower man, light and darkness, stone unhewn and stone perfected, and its initiation symbolically enact journey from dust humanity to image humanity, from fall to restoration, from ignorance to light, and though never explicitly teaching two humanities, its rituals encode same forbidden duality, hidden in plain sight. Throughout Middle Ages and Renaissance, artists encoded forbidden truths in paintings, sculptures, architecture, cathedrals filled with symbols of duality, sun and moon, Adam and Eve, light and shadow, angels and demons, hinting at two humanities, one of dust, one of light. And though official doctrine denied it, artists could hide it in allegory. Mystics could whisper it in vision. Esoteric societies could preserve it in ritual, and thus forbidden history survived. Even folklore kept memory alive. Legends of giants, bloodlines of Nephilim, secret families ruling nations, whispered of two races, one mortal, one divine. Conspiracy theories long before modern age, rooted in Genesis 6 and dual humanity. And though dismissed as superstition, they reveal persistence of memory, refusal of forbidden truth to vanish. The persistence of dual humanity in mysticism, alchemy, secret societies, folklore, shows that suppression by church was never complete. Memory cannot be erased, only buried. Forbidden history survives in hidden forms, waiting to be rediscovered, resurfacing whenever seekers look again at Genesis, reading not with dogma, but with open eyes, seeing two creations, two humanities, and asking what was lost, what was hidden, what remains. Thus Part 10 reveals that medieval mysticism and esoteric traditions preserved the forbidden truth of Genesis. The two humanities exist, one divine, one earthly, one hidden, one manifest, one image, one dust, and though church silenced open teaching, secret currents carried it forward in Kabbalah, in alchemy, in mysticism, in Templars, in Rosicrucians, in Freemasons, in folklore, in whispers, and so forbidden history endured, shaping hidden traditions, waiting for time of unveiling, Renaissance and Enlightenment, rediscovery. By the time of the late Middle Ages, the forbidden history of Genesis, the story of two humanities, had been buried beneath layers of doctrine. The church had declared one creation, one Adam, one body, one salvation, and for centuries this had stood as unquestioned orthodoxy. Yet, in the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered ancient texts, as scholars turned to Greek philosophy, as mystics reached eastward to Kabbalah, as explorers uncovered lost worlds, the forbidden questions resurfaced, and once again thinkers began to whisper of dual creation, of hidden humanity, of the mystery preserved in Genesis but suppressed by authority. The Renaissance was an age of rebirth, of return to sources, ad fontes. Scholars turned to Hebrew scriptures in original, to Greek texts of Plato, to Hermetic writings newly translated. And in this atmosphere, the two creation accounts of Genesis once again appeared strange, troubling, impossible to harmonize. Humanists saw clearly that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 were not the same, one cosmic, one earthy, one equal, one hierarchical, and this awakened curiosity long suppressed. Pico della Mirandola, Renaissance philosopher, studied Kabbalah and Hermeticism, blending Christian theology with Jewish mysticism. He spoke of humanity as double, possessing divine spark and earthly body, free to ascend or descend. And though he did not openly declare two humanities, his vision reflected dual creation, one higher, one lower. And he saw Genesis as allegory of this truth, and his oration on the dignity of man presented humanity as capable of becoming angel or beast, divine or dust. Echo of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, Marsilio Ficino, translator of Plato, taught of soul imprisoned in body, of return to divine, of inner light, and his Platonic theology revived ancient dualism, aligning with Genesis tension, soul of light trapped in clay. First humanity forgotten, second humanity dominant, yet possibility of return, awakening, ascent to divine, again forbidden truth reappearing under cloak of philosophy. Alchemy flourished in Renaissance, and alchemists spoke of two men, old Adam and new Adam, earthly man and spiritual man, work of transmutation as restoration of first humanity, transformation of leaden dust into golden light, symbols of sun and moon, king and queen, reconciliation of opposites, all reflecting dual creation, hidden within mystical laboratories, encoded in allegory, forbidden history, disguised as chemical art. The Reformation shook authority of church, opening scripture to direct reading, and with it the dual accounts of Genesis troubled reformers, some insisting on literal harmony, others seeing allegory. But mystics among Protestants read Genesis differently. Some sects declared that true Christians were seed of first humanity, children of light, while others were of dust, seed of serpent, and though condemned as heresy, this teaching reflected forbidden interpretation of dual humanity. In 17th century, secret societies like Rosicrucians declared possession of hidden wisdom, blending alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and within their manifestos, humanity was described as fallen, yet possessing hidden spark, capable of restoration, echo of two humanities, one lost, one remembered, and their influence spread across Europe, inspiring seekers to question unity, to seek hidden creation. The Enlightenment brought critical study of Scripture, scholars comparing texts, recognizing multiple sources within Genesis, priestly account of Genesis 1, Yahwist account of Genesis 2, and though explained in terms of history of composition, this rediscovery revealed again the duality, two stories, two origins, and some philosophers saw in this evidence of contradiction, others evidence of mystery, but all recognized that Genesis was not simple, that it preserved multiple voices, and forbidden history once again emerged from shadows. Enlightenment thinkers also turned to other cultures, comparing myths, Sumerian and Babylonian epics newly discovered, Egyptian records studied, and scholars saw parallels. Humans made of clay mixed with divine, duality of mortal and immortal, echoes of Genesis, confirmation of dual creation. And the question arose, did Genesis preserve memory of ancient universal truth that humanity was double, created twice, one divine, one dust? Mystics of enlightenment, such as Swedenborg, spoke of inner and outer man, spiritual and natural humanity, correspondence between higher and lower worlds, humanity as bridge between divine and earthly, and though couched in visionary language, it reflected same forbidden truth. Two humanities, one hidden, one manifest, and spiritual work as restoration of first Romantic era that followed rediscovered mysticism, poets and visionaries declaring humanity divine yet fallen, Blake speaking of two Adams, eternal and mortal, declaring that true man is not body but spirit imprisoned in dust yearning for return, and his prophetic works are filled with Genesis imagery, retelling story as dual creation, forbidden history in poetic form. Thus, through Renaissance and Enlightenment, the forbidden truth resurfaced, rediscovered in Kabbalah, revived in Hermeticism, studied in alchemy, whispered in secret societies, critiqued in scholarship, imagined in poetry. And though never openly canonized, it persisted, always just beneath surface, always forbidden yet alive, always challenging doctrine of one humanity, one fall, one salvation, by insisting that Genesis speaks of two, one divine, one mortal, one remembered, one erased. This rediscovery also prepared ground for modern scholarship, for critical study of Bible that would emerge in 19th century, for recovery of Gnostic texts in 20th, for modern fascination with Nephilim, Lilith, hidden bloodlines, all tracing back to Genesis duality, preserved, suppressed, rediscovered, again and again, and always forbidden. Thus, Part 11 shows how Renaissance and Enlightenment reopened the question of Genesis, how mystics, philosophers, scholars, secret societies preserved and revived dual creation, how forbidden history survived suppression, how two humanities returned to thought, shaping modern understanding, reminding us that Genesis is not closed, but open, not single, but double, not history of one humanity, but forbidden memory of two. The end of the mystery. In the modern age, the forbidden history of Genesis has returned in full force, rediscovered through archaeology, reimagined through mysticism, debated in scholarship, and sensationalized in conspiracy. What was once whispered in secret societies or encoded in allegory is now accessible in books, films, internet forums, and academic debates. And the ancient question remains, did God create two types of humans? Are we double? Are we divided? Are we spirit and dust? Are we one creation or two? The 19th century brought critical study of the Bible, scholars using historical methods to analyze texts, identifying multiple sources. Priestly account in Genesis chapter 1, Yahwist account in Genesis 2, recognizing they were not harmonized but deliberately placed side by side, preserving contradiction, and this confirmed what mystics had long said, that Genesis preserves dual creation, and while academics explain this as redaction history, others saw it as confirmation of forbidden truth. Two humanities preserved in canon. The same century brought archaeology, unearthing Sumerian and Babylonian tablets, discovering Atrahasis, Enuma Elish, Gilgamesh, all speaking of humans created from clay mixed with divine essence, of flood destroying giants, of long-lived kings before flood, parallels with Genesis undeniable, and many concluded that Genesis was not alone, but part of ancient memory of dual creation, two humanities, one exalted, one mortal. In 20th century, two discoveries transformed our understanding: Dead Sea Scrolls and Nag Hammadi Library. The first showed Jewish sects preserving Enoch, Jubilees, writings about Nephilim, Watchers, multiple humanities, hidden in caves, suppressed by later canon. The second revealed Gnostic Gospels, speaking openly of two creations, two Adams, humanity of light and humanity of dust, serpent as liberator, Eve as awakener, Christ as revealer, and suddenly forbidden history was no longer rumor, but written, preserved, undeniable. These texts showed that early Christians and Jews debated dual humanity, that suppression was deliberate, that forbidden history was real, and rediscovery reignited debate. Scholars studying, mystics celebrating, seekers proclaiming that within us lies hidden humanity. Spark of light, first creation, image of God forgotten, buried, waiting to be awakened. At same time, science uncovered its own version of dual humanity, anthropology revealing that Homo sapiens was not alone that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other hominins coexisted, interbred, and modern humans carry their genes, and this scientific discovery echoes myth. Two humanities, mixing, hybrids, survival of some lineages, extinction of others. Forbidden memory of Nephilim now paralleled by genetics, forbidden history of two creations mirrored in science. In conspiracy circles, the Nephilim returned. Stories of ancient bloodlines, elite families descending from giants, ruling nations, hidden dynasties, Illuminati, controlling world, secret knowledge preserved, and though often fantastical, these theories reflect persistence of Genesis 6, sons of God and daughters of men. Nephilim still among us, forbidden humanity still surviving, ruling, waiting, and though not proven, the fascination itself shows that dual humanity continues to haunt imagination. In mysticism, the theme resurfaces again. New Age teachings speak of light beings, starseeds, humans of higher vibration, contrasted with ordinary mortals. Again, dual humanity, one spiritual, one earthly. And though language is modern, pattern is ancient. Genesis retold in cosmic terms, forbidden history reshaped for new seekers. In psychology, too, the idea persists. Jung spoke of archetypal self, hidden image within, shadow of earthly self, duality of psyche. And though not theological, it reflects same truth. Two selves, two humanities within one, divine image and dust, and spiritual work as integration, awakening of higher self. So what does it mean today if Genesis truly describes two creations? If humanity is dual, if God created not one but two types of humans? It means our identity is more complex than doctrine allowed. It means within us lies conflict between image and dust, spirit and flesh, eternal and mortal. It means history itself is shaped by this duality. Warzual struggles, religions, philosophies, all reflections of two humanities wrestling within us and among us. If first humanity still exists, hidden, spiritual, then awakening is possible. Restoration of image of God, return to archetypal creation, and mystics of all ages were right, that within us is divine spark untouched by fall, waiting for recognition. If second humanity dominates history, then suffering, toil, curse are inevitable, but they are not whole truth. For higher humanity endures, forbidden but not destroyed. Perhaps the two humanities are not separate races, but two aspects within each person, one higher, one lower. And our task is to choose, to awaken, to live from divine image rather than dust. Perhaps this is the true meaning of Genesis, hidden, forbidden, suppressed, that we are double, and salvation is recognition of first creation within. Or perhaps there were truly two lineages, one divine, one earthly, mixing, producing hybrids, Nephilim, giants, rulers, elites, and their memory survives in myths of bloodlines, and their genes survive in us. And science has only begun to uncover this, and forbidden history may one day be proven in DNA. Either way, the forbidden history of Genesis matters, because it challenges us to look deeper, to question doctrines, to read text without fear, to see what is written plainly. Two creations, two humanities, one image, one dust, one blessed, one cursed, one archetypal, one historical, one forgotten, one remembered. In the end, the mystery of Genesis is not solved but opened, not erased but revealed, and we stand at threshold of choice, to live as dust or to awaken as image, to accept curse or to reclaim blessing, to remain in exile or to return to archetypal creation. For forbidden history tells us that within us lies first humanity, waiting, hidden, divine. Thus, Part 12 concludes the journey, showing that from ancient Mesopotamia to modern science, from Gnostics to genetics, from Kabbalah to conspiracy, the idea of two humanities persists. Forbidden, suppressed, rediscovered, always alive. And perhaps this is truth of Genesis, not error, not contradiction, but revelation, that God created two types of humans, and that our destiny is to recognize both, to reconcile both, to choose which we will become.